Okay, in this video we're going to talk about something that we should have talked about around spring break when we're talking about the topics in Unit 4 that involve uh, money, banking, the financial system, and then monetary policy. And this is going to be the belief of monetarism. And monetarism is going to be a more modern form of classical economics. And one of their main beliefs focuses on the money supply. But before we get there, one of the things that they also believe is that a competitive system, competitive market system, uh, can have significant amount of stability if it's not for government interference. And so some of these examples of government interference are going to be minimum wages, pro-union legislation, guaranteed agriculture prices like price ceilings and price floors, and some of that's going to be really significant. And so I just want to highlight a couple things here just so that you know the general basics of monetarism. It's going to focus on the money supply and that they believe that this market system is stable if it weren't for the government to get involved and just mess things up. Uh, and they believe that the government and governmental actions have really contributed to a lot of these business cycles, these boom and bust cycles of either recessions or periods of inflation where those numbers are just too high. But this is the main thing that I want you to take away from the monetarists, that changes in price level are going to be caused by changes in the money supply. And a lot of this revolves around this term called velocity and this equation of exchange, we're going to call it, which we're going to get to in a minute or two. But the first thing that I want you to know is actually something that's pretty interesting. It's going to be velocity of money, and the velocity is going to be the average number of times a dollar bill changes hands. And now I wrote in a given year, but you might see this in a specific period of time. So I'm going to write this in the number of times a dollar bill changes hands in a particular period of time. It can be a year, it might be a quarter, it might be a month, whatever the time period is. The velocity of money is going to be how many times a normal dollar bill might change hands. So what we're really measuring are transactions here. How many times does it change hands? Meaning how many times are people buying things? And the way that we can find that is through this formula where velocity is going to equal the nominal GDP divided by the money supply. And I thought this would be interesting to just look this up and see if we could actually calculate what the velocity of money is. So what I did earlier today was look up some of these numbers, and you can actually find this from the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve. And so the St. Louis branch does a lot of work with economic research and tracking a lot of these numbers. And so what I've got here is the amount of M1 that's currently in our economy, the money supply of just M1, which is going to be dollar bills, notes, coins, currency, checkable deposits, things in our checking account. And so what I did, I thought this was interesting, by the way, of just tracking the amount of money in our economy. And so these gray parts here are going to be where there are recessions, where the GDP is actually falling. So this is going to be the Great Recession from just a couple of years ago. And what's been really interesting is watching the Federal Reserve increase the money supply, which I think has been really interesting. So currently we have a amount of money in the economy that's going to be 3,664 billion, which I thought was incredibly high. And then I have also tracked our nominal gross domestic product. So again, this has inflation built into it, so this is going to be higher than our real GDP. And you can just see how wild this is, just been increasing and increasing and increasing as we produce more and as the price levels have been increasing. So this is actually going to be, and I have it right here, 19,000 billion dollars. And so if we do a little bit of math here, we can actually find the velocity of money, and we can compare that with what the actual number is. And so I thought this might be interesting to do, and we can do this down below here. And so what I ended up doing is just writing this equation where the velocity is going to equal the nominal GDP divided by the money supply. And I'm going to just write that as M for right now. And so it actually ends up becoming 19,754 billion. So I'm going to add in a couple other numbers here. There we go. Divide that by the amount of money. So it's going to be 664, 300, and then tack on a couple more zeros. When you do this division out, you get the velocity of money. So the last quarter from which we have data, which is going to be the fourth quarter of 2017, based off of these numbers, I ended up with a number that is 5.39. So in 3 months, in the final quarter, on average, a dollar bill is changing hands just over 5 times. And that compares actually pretty well with the actual number, which I've got right here, which is 5.49. Now, the reason why it might be off by a little bit is just from our rounding error, because we don't have the actual nominal GDP and the actual amount of money down to the ones unit. So I thought this was going to be really interesting, and what this actually measures is just how many transactions there are. And so I thought this part was really interesting, where there's so many transactions in the 2005, 2006, 2007, and then when we have this recession, it falls significantly. So I thought this was really interesting. And again, they make a note of this here. It's going to be the frequency at which a unit of currency used to produce domestically produced goods and services within that time period, the number of times a dollar is spent to buy goods and services. If the velocity is increasing, more transactions are occurring. So I think this is really interesting to see, are people saving their money or are people spending their money? But we're getting a little bit besides the point, so I want to keep on working with our notes. So going back up here, the equation of exchange is going to be one of the main things that the monetarists believe, and this all ties in with the quantity theory of money. So what they believe is that there's going to be a predictable and steady relationship between the supply of money and price levels. And that ties in with what we said back up here. Changes in the price level are going to be caused by changes in the money supply. So what they believe, and you have to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, to make the numbers all work based off of the things we just did, but what they will believe is that the velocity of money is going to be relatively constant. They're also going to believe that real GDP is going to be relatively constant. So what they're able to do is they're going to make a connection between M and P. So if the velocity of money is constant and if real GDP is constant, if the money supply increases, the price levels increase, in which you have seen. And if the money supply decreases, price levels decrease. So if there's contractionary monetary policy that decreases the money supply, price levels decrease. There's one other thing, and this pops up on tests every now and then. We had talked about nominal GDP a minute ago, and I'd shown you the actual numbers for nominal GDP. Price levels times real GDP, this is nominal GDP. So if you see this equation with reference to nominal GDP, don't let this stress you out. Price levels times real GDP, which is our quantity of output, that is the nominal GDP. The last thing I just want to show you is just how this might work on a graph. And so this looks pretty goofy because you've got a y-axis on the left and on the right. And I just want to show you this relationship between price levels and then the value of money. So take a second to copy these down, and I'm going to fill in a couple of these things as we go. The first thing is going to be the value of money is going to be the reciprocal of price level. So it's going to be 1 over PL. And this will be high. So I'm going to do an H for high, and this will be a low amount. So this will be increasing as we go up, but this will be low up top and high down below on this other axis. And so what I want you to see is that there's going to be an inverse relationship between the value of money and price levels. So if we were to increase the supply of money, I'm going to draw that in here. So if the supply of money increases, we end up with, and I'll draw the second point in, we end up with price levels rising from low to high. Price levels rise, and the value of the dollar falls. So now things are more expensive, so the value of our dollar doesn't get us as much. So price levels have increased in this situation. The value of our money does not get us as far. That's as the supply of money increases. That should make sense, just going back to basic supply and demand. And I want to fill in the same things over here. This is going to be the value of money again, 1 over the price levels. This will be low, this will be high, and it's going to be the inverse over here. So what would happen if we decreased the supply of money? And if I have that over here, so the supply of money falls, and what I'm going to end up with is a higher price level. If I'm going from, oh no, I take that back. A lower price level, because I'm going to be going up here, and a higher value of money. So if we were to decrease the money supply from SM to SM1, what we're going to end up with is this is contractionary policy, so price levels fall, but the value of our money, what our dollar ends up buying, is going to be more and more and more. So this is just a graphical representation of this theory. And I know this is been known to stress people out in the past, so you will not see these graphs on a test or on the AP, but I think it's interesting just to show you the inverse relationship between the price levels and then the value of our money, what our money can buy. When things are really expensive, our dollar bill will not get us as much. When things are much less expensive, our dollar bill goes a lot farther.